Howdy goons, retro gaming is in a very interesting spot right now. Retro games have never been as expensive as they are now, and yet we live in the golden age of access. Should a person know the magical words, they have access to the entire history of gaming in just an instant. I could in just 5 minutes download the entirety of the GBA library and get to playing my faves even faster. We also have these awesome handhelds from companies like Anbernic, Retroid, Ioneo, Powkitty, and others that can run these games on the go or as a console on our TVs. So when I look at a product like Evercade's series of consoles and cartridges, I kind of just scratch my head. Then I remember that not everyone is as tech savvy as the emulation community is. What's second nature to me is like climbing Everest with no gear to others. This made me curious about who these consoles were for and why someone may want one of these. My first issue is that these systems appeal to retro gamers, and we come in two kinds: the ones who are fine with emulation and the ones who are hardcore original hardware only. For arcade, we've never really had a physical hardware option, so these Evercade systems don't really appeal to either of these groups. That means that these are designed to appeal to one person: dads. Or just arcade fans, I guess. Older men who love this stuff but probably dropped off the hobby because societal expectations and the incorrect belief that once you hit 40 you can't enjoy video games or have fun anymore. I encounter more and more people every day that tell me I'm too old to play video games. You can't really expect people who had to be taught the computer by their kids to understand emulation without help. These older men might also be scared of legal boogeymen that most emulation fans learned don't actually exist long ago. To me, it's only a crime if it's enforced, and no one is going to jail in the US for downloading GBA games. Just distributing them. Don't distribute them. The system I'm talking about today appeals to me in a way though. I've said that due to the rising cost of hardware that a $100 handheld could really disrupt the gaming market right now. This is honestly a bit of wishful thinking on my part. I just want the GBA to come back. But with how popular indie games are now, a system that runs pixel games and low poly 3D for $100 could be the disruption that the market needs. Well, we might have that system already, if not for a few nagging issues. Here's the Super Pocket. It comes from Hyper Megatech and runs Evercade cartridges, and if you love arcade games, these are a pretty decent deal. For just $70 you get a handheld and a cartridge with 14 games, and you really can't beat the simplicity of put in a cartridge and play. But it's actually even simpler than that. These Super Pocket handhelds have their games stored locally, so you don't even need to have the cartridge in. It doesn't get much easier than that. But let's get started with the Super Pocket. Keep in mind that I bought this all with my own money, I didn't receive anything for free, and they have no say in the contents of this video, so let's get going with another hashtag not sponsored. The Super Pocket keeps its packaging and setup simple. I don't do unboxings much anymore because in the emulator handheld space it's incredibly rare for a system to be truly out of the box ready, but the Super Pocket is. We have the console with the cart inside it already. As I mentioned earlier, the cart doesn't actually store the game, but rather it's a dust protector since the games are stored locally. We also get a small pamphlet and a USB to USB-C 5-volt charging cable. Considering the low power of Evercade handhelds, this is just fine. For power, the Evercade and Super Pocket lineup is usually PS1 and below, meaning they have the power of Linux-based handheld emulation, and yes, it is emulation, not FPGA. Since the Super Pocket can play all the same carts that the Evercade systems can, we can assume that the Super Pocket has the same power, which kinda makes me worried for N64 performance. Cartridge-based and emulation has a lot of restrictions, and we'll get into that soonish. The display is a 2.8-inch screen, which is incredibly small. This becomes a huge problem for arcade and home console games, which make up the majority of the Evercade lineup. Visually speaking, I'd have to say that this small screen is the worst possible way to experience beautiful arcade games like Shock Troopers and Metal Slug X. These games tend to have less chunky sprites because they're expected to be played on a large screen, so these already small sprites are made yet smaller. The display also lacks a way to adjust the brightness, which means it's bad for outside play and drains too much battery in low light conditions, which is unfortunate as the battery is already terrible with an average 4-hour battery life. The controls are very interesting though. Its D-pad is a disc style like Genesis, which is good for fighting games. I've become a recent fan of this style of D-pad, but I feel like this one isn't one of the better executions of it. That's not to say that it's bad, it's just okay. Unless you happen to be pressing on the very edges of the pad, you won't experience any discomfort. Weirdly though, the backseat buttons aren't in the traditional SNES position, but rather the Xbox layout with A at the bottom. But the weirdest part has to be what they do with the volume and the shoulders. On the back, we have just the weirdest little freaks. The shoulders and triggers are buttons that sit flat against the back of the handheld with a slight upward curve. These are incredibly awful, but continues the tradition of Game Boy form factors having awful bumpers. This isn't Hyper Megatech's fault, but instead a side effect of the Game Boy not being designed with bumpers in mind, so of course slapping them onto this shape isn't going to make sense. Thankfully, none of of the included games I've played use these buttons. And another odd choice related to the shoulders is this little lip. You can see this lip on other emulation handhelds, and this is to make the grip better. The buttons are supposed to go above it so that your index fingers rest on it, and then the lip would rest on the top of your middle fingers, kind of like a pinch, like imagine making scissors with your index fingers and middle fingers, just like you're doing like a scissor motion. It kind of pinches it like that. The volume is also in a weird spot sitting on the back rather than on the side where you would expect it. We also have select, start, and menu. The bottom has an on switch, headphone jack, USB-C charging, various vent holes, but considering the low power, it shouldn't ever get hot, and it didn't in my experience, and a mono speaker on the front. We also, of course, have the cartridge slot. As for size and pocket friendliness, it's about the same size as a Game Boy Color, but with all of the edges rounded so it fits in your pocket better. I've had no issues bringing it around. It's actually very low profile in my pockets. Games. The Super Pocket does come with some games on an included cartridge. Not really. They just make you think it's on the cartridge. It's on the system itself, and that collection is the Evercade Neo Geo collection, which is Alpha Missions 2, Blazing Star, Fatal Fury Special, King of Monsters 2, Last Resort, Metal Slug X, Mutation Nation, Overtop, Samurai Showdown 2, Son Goku 3, Shock Trooper 2nd Squad, Stalker Brawl, The Last Blade, and Top Hunter, Roddy and Kathy. I did order a second cart called the Renovation Collection, and it's like half RPGs, but I'll be talking about it at a later date as I had to order it from eBay since Amazon would take almost a month to arrive. The included games aren't too bad, and I plan to talk about them in their own video later, but I'm a little on the younger side for retro gamers. I'm only 35 years old. My first system was a GBC, so I don't have any nostalgia for arcade games, but I do like Metal Slug, shoot 'em ups, and beat 'em ups, and there are a good amount of the latter two there. There are a few fighters too, but personally I don't see the appeal of fighting games on the Super Pocket. Isn't the point of them to be playing them against other people? Seems weird to put it on this handheld, which has no way of doing multiplayer. Had this come with like the VS system, that would make sense. Availability in general, though, was a major concern for me. Most of what I wanted wasn't available in the US or was out entirely. Neo Geo, as I mentioned, is something I don't have nostalgia for outside of Metal Slug. I tried out Antstream Arcade, a video game arcade streaming service, when they sent me a year sub for a review. While I don't care for game streaming, I did find a love for Data East games like Tumble Pop, Chain Reaction, and Burger Time. But the Data East Super Pocket was sold out. It's odd because these games being bundled isn't that rare of an occurrence. It was a little bit of a bummer. They did have Banjo and Kazooie, but I didn't have an N64 growing up, so I've never played it. It didn't help that the handheld was mustard and ketchup colored, so I didn't really have much of an urge to get that one. Once I picked out the Neo Geo Pocket, I went on a search for RPGs and didn't find much. This platform really lacks variety. It's like 90% arcade games. But from a technical standpoint, the Super Pocket can barely handle the games. I hope this isn't an issue with the other systems. I hope that it's just that the Super Pocket is probably underpowered. I can't imagine this handles N64 at all, which is odd considering that one of them comes with Banjo and Kazooie. If the rest of the Evercade handheld lineup is this same power level, then I don't see this as a definitive way to play the games, as the arcade games experience slowdowns. But it's not like arcade fans have a ton of options here. So this is going to sound mean, but I do appreciate what Evercade is doing here, and I've already bought more than one cartridge, so I'm kind of in here already. I'm going to be getting more. But this hardware isn't well suited to the primarily arcade lineup. This level of power would be better focused on things like pixel home-based consoles and handhelds. They do have options, but I think they should be trying to contact Konami, Sega, and companies like that. Getting more games from those companies would really rock. I would love to see a Castlevania collection or the Yu-Gi-Oh collection. I suspected going in that this platform was for older people who aren't aware of other options or are scared of legal boogeymen. If you just took the time to learn how to source ROMs, for $70 like the Super Pocket, you could play any PS1 game or prior. For $200, like the upcoming Nexus, you could play PS2 and GameCube with ease. Anyway, a big issue for me with the handhelds is that the Neo Geo edition doesn't have its game on a cart. It's stored locally in the system because you can play games without the cart. This is kind of nice, I guess, but really inconvenient should you wish to trade carts with a friend or borrow theirs. It's also saying that if you want every Evercade game, you're going to have to buy every Super Pocket. So say I bought the Neo Geo one and I wanted to play Banjo. Well, you think I'd just go buy the Rare Collection cart? Nope. It doesn't contain some of the games on the Super Pocket Rare. If its games are stored locally like my Neo Geo one, that means I have to buy a second handheld and make sure I bring the right one that day. This isn't very consumer friendly. Believe it or not, I do want this platform to work out. It's great and cool, and we should be heading in this direction. It should be totally possible for me to just give companies money and they give me the ROMs. But things like this, where the games are baked into the handhelds or their availability issues in the US, present a major problem. That's not even mentioning how indies are handled. Most indie games are multiple games on a single cartridge, so you get collections where there are as many as 10 sharing a single $20 price. There is no way these indie companies are getting a fair deal when $20 is being split up 10 ways, after the cartridge manufacturing fee is taken out too. When it's just 2 games, it's not so bad, but you can get some really odd combos that don't make a ton of sense, and with 1 game, 1 cart, you run into the value problem. Every other cart on this system has 10 games on it, so a single indie game on a single cart is competing with collections that have nostalgia for them. This is not a good platform for indies. Bonus features. There isn't much in the way of bonus features. For the most part, you'll get games on carts and play them. There isn't an account system on the handheld or any form of social media aspects like platforms like Antstream Arcade has. There also isn't any achievements like we have on emulation through retro achievements. I really like being able to track and share my progress in these games, and achievements are a great way to quantify that. Like saying I beat Metal Slug X doesn't sound as accomplished as I 100% it. Considering some achievements for Metal Slug only have a 1% completion, that's kind of a big deal. Saying I beat Metal Slug X without the achievements to prove it has the same power as it did back in the day on the playground. People would have to take your word for it if you're a trustworthy sort, or you'd have to snap a pic with the family Polaroid. Thing is, all of the games on the Neo Geo cartridge have achievement sets except for Alpha Mission 2. So you could just play these on your computer or on any other emulation system and get access to these achievements. So these physical versions are behind in some aspects, especially when it comes to social media aspects, but I don't imagine most people in the age group that is interested in this stuff are wanting to get into the social aspects of gaming. But since this is emulation on the Super Pocket, what incentive does an emulation enthusiast like I have? I have a Steam Deck that can play any retro game and a good amount of new games, but my $100 RG Vita can play every game ever released to an Evercade cart, plus some PS2, Dreamcast, and PSP. Since it's all emulation, what incentive does an original hardware retro gamer have? A retro purist would want original hardware. When it comes to arcade games, we obviously can't do that, but social aspects is the one part that could put them ahead. And this is something that these modern retro gaming options don't get, is that the retro gaming space has evolved a lot since 2000. It's become just as much of a social experience as any other kind of gaming. Antstream is the only company that gets this aspect, but it's a game streaming platform, which is only a good option for people with decent internet, which not everyone has. This isn't a huge deal for me and doesn't factor into my review because I imagine most Evercade owners don't care about social media or an achievement system. Overall, the Pocket and Evercade as a platform could be great, but it has several issues that really keep it from truly excelling. Despite boasting 60 cartridges with over 600 games, this is a UK-based company and most of these games won't reach Americans. They're not in brick-and-mortar stores where the DAD demo, their biggest demo, is most likely to see them, and if you find them on Amazon, you'll see less than a dozen of their available cartridges and barely any of them with Prime. In the days of instant access, most don't want to wait 2 weeks to play some games, let alone a month. This means if you want something specific like I did with the Renovation Collection, because it has a ton of RPGs I've never played, you can look forward to a multi-week wait as the cart has to ship from overseas. Remember that I'm someone with the know-how and tech to play these games in 5 minutes. What incentive do I have to purchase and wait for these outside of a review video? Collection, I guess. They do have nice packaging. But is a dad going to be this patient, or would he opt for one of his other hobbies that are readily available in his own country? $20 to $40 a cart isn't much, but with original hardware, $40 gives you a lot of game choices as well. The reality is that the people who would have the most interest in Evercade products are unable to reliably get them, which is kind of funny when you see people claim that Evercade will save retro gaming. Okay, wake me up when the cartridges and systems are in stores. This isn't to say that the Super Pocket is without value though, I do like it quite a bit. It's one of the cooler doohickeys that I happen to own. For just $70, or in my case $50 for the Neo Geo one because of Prime Day sales, for just $70 you can get in on Evercade games and start building your collection. If you have faith in this product, you have a very cheap starting off point. The EXP-R, the other Evercade handheld, is almost double the price at $130, and the upcoming Nexus is almost triple at $200. $200. The home console is similarly priced to the EXPR at $120 to $150. The Super Pocket is a fantastic deal in this regard, so if you try it and like it, you can start building your collection in advance of the Nexus or other future Evercade hardware, which is kind of what I'm doing. That's what presents the problem though. When you can't easily access carts, is there any other reason to have faith in the brand long run? How will this save retro gaming when they can't meet demand? When I have to order a cartridge from eBay, can you really say that this is an accessible platform? I don't think so. Like, the pamphlets included with the cartridges in the game system are all like collect them all, but then I go online and the Atari collection is like over $100 because they didn't make another one. How am I supposed to collect them all? And how do you make money from that when I'm having to buy them secondhand? There's a big availability issue. Note from Editorland: if Evercade isn't reprinting their older carts like Atari Collection 1, and I can't readily buy them from Evercade themselves, how is this any different than big companies who refuse to re-release their old games? It's not. This is the same issue we've been having with emulation for a long time. Evercade isn't doing anything new, it isn't saving retro gaming. All it's done is repackage the same issue that we're already experiencing, but on new hardware. In reality, these games are just as scarce as they were before. This isn't archival or preservation, this definitely isn't saving retro gaming, and may even make these companies become more lazy about re-releasing. If they release an Evercade cart, they may think that that's good enough instead of putting it on a digital platform where we can all access it without limited supply, or on a system that would print more copies. And there's no reason that this can't be in a store, like at least in a GameStop. Come on, at least in a GameStop. Then there's the whole CD logic of these carts. Why would I buy a CD for just one song I like when iTunes sells me the one song for a fraction of the disc's cost? Indies will lose money through this bundling on cartridges. I bought the Neo Geo Super Pocket, and the only game on it I bought it for was Metal Slug, but I also bought it with the intent to get more cartridges. And I'm also making a video. Not everyone else is going to do that. I get that with retro games, we want physical games, so we own our collection. But there should be some form of digital distribution for those of us not lucky enough to be born in tea and crumpets land. It's just made all the more frustrating by the site not hosting the sales of their own cartridges. Why is it that when I go to buy a cartridge from your site, I am instead being redirected to other sites? Why can you not sell your own cartridges through your own site? And a lot of the time, when I click these links to other sites to go buy cartridges, it doesn't link me to cartridges, it links me to systems, or it links to a generalized search, as if I'm so stupid that I couldn't go to Best Buy and type in Evercade. And that's seriously what it does. You will click a product that you are interested in, and it will say, buy here, and you click it, and it will take you to the search page of the website with Evercade typed in the title. Or if it's GameStop, it links you directly to the Evercade Nexus page. It does not link you to any of the cartridges, because GameStop doesn't sell any of the cartridges. The entire process of joining the Evercade family is annoying and inconvenient with no alternatives. It sucks. But I like the handheld and the cartridges, very nostalgic. I absolutely love the cases. The cases are outstanding. Just wish that they sold in stores like old video games did. That's the appeal, right? Video games like they used to be. If you could go into Walmart and pick up a new cartridge, this would be an easy recommendation. But every single cool thing about this setup is followed up with the bitter aftertaste that is acquiring the media. And it shouldn't be this bad. It's been years after the release of the original hardware. Honestly, this system seems ideal for like a monthly delivery system like the Playdate, where it has weekly games that it sends you, but like monthly instead, where I pay $40 a month and they mail you a random cart. Or, you know, just a subscription service to send me the newest carts as they come out. Anyway, I rate the handheld and cart a 7 out of 10, and the distribution a 1 out of 10. In all honesty, if you're seeing this and interested in playing more than collecting, then please check out one of my videos on an emulation handheld like the XU20V32 or the RG34XX. You are way better off getting a $60 emulation handheld and learning how to use ROMs. Obviously though, Evercade is an ideal scenario. It's what we want. Companies licensing their games on handhelds where we can play them, but the lack of availability keeps this from ever being great. I want to give these companies money for their old games and they give me the ROM file to own. A cartridge is second place. I'll take that. But it's why I like GOG and buying Konami or Capcom collections. I wish they sold these games individually, but I'm glad that the option exists at all. So, who do I recommend it for? 3 people. People buying a gift for an old dude. Make sure you get him the cartridge that has the most games he likes on it, and you can keep getting him new cartridges for future games as future gifts. But be prepared for him to one day ask where to get more games. There is a better argument though for you getting an emulation handheld and setting it up with kiosk or kid mode enabled instead. The second is someone who heard all of what I said in this video and you still want one. You're fully aware of the drawbacks and pain involved, but you're here to collect. This is the best option as these will one day suffer to the same retro bubble as the GameCube did once people realized how cool the Evercade is. There aren't a ton of options for arcade games, so Evercade will eventually be a hit on the secondhand market. If you love arcade games though, this is pretty much the only way to own a majority of them without buying massive arcade machines or boards. The final is someone who plans to buy an EverSD, a flash cart that lets you put your game files on an SD card, pop it into the Evercade cart, and play the games that way. But at this point, I would suggest just saving money and getting an emulation handheld instead. Funnily enough though, you might get your EverSD in the mail sooner than an official cartridge if you're having to buy it through eBay. Who should stay away? Anyone who thinks they can learn to use an emulation handheld and isn't concerned with owning a cartridge or not, and people who are already emulating. You're not getting anything new here. And that's it for this one. Don't forget to tip your Overlord with likes, subs, and hypes if you're feeling spicy. Special thanks to the members like Fabronaut, Dragon Fanatic, Linky, AstroPixie YT, and Willie Pete. Without awesome goons like them, world domination would be a lot harder. I'll see you later. Bye.